After a little bit of an unplanned break, I've got a couple things to talk about in this episode. This background isn't one of them, but I'll mention it. And, of course, a beer to brew. And that all starts now. Welcome to Big Monster Brewing, the Anvil Foundry edition. I am Matt. Today I will be going through what I did to brew an amber ale that I made for a festival that happened recently. But before I start, if you're new to this, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you'll be caught up on all the Anvil Foundry Brewing videos that I make, not just the 6.5 Anvil Foundry brewing videos anymore. And that's one of the first things I'm going to talk about. Actually, let me address the elephant. I don't think there's an elephant on that screen behind me in the room. I am in a temporary setup. You're going to see this the next, I don't know how many videos. Long story short, I started a new job. I am revamping the studio that we do all of our podcasting and video recordings in to be a dual workspace for that and my new job, and to take care of some long overdue water damage that was done in the corner of the room. So I've been exiled out into this area for the next foreseeable recordings, because I'm going to catch up on a lot in the days that I'm out here. So, okay, that's explanation number one. Explanation number two is that I now, in addition to the 6.5 gallon Anvil Foundry, I now own a 10.5 gallon Anvil Foundry, and there's a couple reasons for that. The big one is my wife has really stepped up in her brewing a lot. She has been brewing a lot of experimental beers, learning a lot of classic styles, making a lot of beers for competitions, and with us both being Monday through Friday 9-to-5ers, we kind of fight over who's going to get to use the anvil when the weekend comes around. So that kind of led us to thinking that we could use a second anvil. I mean, it's a little bit of an extravagance, but it is going to be used. We looked down the line a little bit to what we got going on in terms of beer and brewing, and with festivals coming back and our brew club really making a concentrated effort in getting into more festivals, getting more people involved in the hobby, 10.5 to make 5-gallon batches really seemed like a logical choice, because for other festivals, we made 5-gallon batches. We've done back-to-back brews on the 6.5-gallon Foundry. So if we're going to get a second anvil, why not get one that can do our usual 2.5 experiment, or anywhere from our 1-gallon or experiments to our 2.5-gallon usual competition / kegerator brews, and have a single vessel that can also accommodate the 5 gallons. So that's one of the reasons, that's one of the big reasons that we bought it. And I'll be doing a couple 5-gallon brews on this channel now and again, not near as many as the 6.5. The 6.5 is still the workhorse of the family. In fact, if that ever goes, that's actually going to be a really upsetting day. I just realized as I thought about that. I hope that's not for a while. But small batch brewing is still going to be the main focus of this channel. So with that explanation out of the way, and an explanation why you're going to see a 10.5 gallon Anvil Foundry in this video, let's talk about the beer. I wanted to make I've actually made this a few times for this particular festival. This festival is the Sanford Pints N Paws Festival. It's in Sanford, Florida, which is not terribly far from Orlando. It's a benefit. A couple of animal shelters is not the right word. Organizations that take in pets and find homes for them. And it's one that I've always loved attending before I started brewing, and now I love brewing for. And I've made this particular amber ale for it before, because it's a nice crowd pleaser. It's a little malty, got a little bit of hops to it. Just about any beer drinker can find something they like about this, and it's a great beer to introduce to someone if they're asking about the homebrewing hobby at our tent. It's a great example of what can be done like right down that middle of the road, and you can explain to them how it can go either way. And then that wasn't the only beer. We had like 6-7 beers on tap. We had Schwartz beer. We had a Jasmine Lager. I think we had some kind of IPA or pale ale, something hoppy, a little bit that ran the whole gambit. It's a great beer, like I said, to introduce people to the home brewing hobby and a great beer to have at a festival like this. And it's usually one that kicks almost every festival. This time it didn't. I had a little left over, but by the time that got shaken up and the drive home is very cloudy. So I did have the foresight to pull off a couple bottles for this video. So I'm going to be using one of those bottle pours rather than pouring from the keg. I'm sure I could let the keg sit in the refrigerator for another week or so and it'll clear, but I'm going to get these videos going. So that's the story of the beer. And let's talk about what goes into this particular recipe. This one starts off with 6.65 gallons of RO water that I heat up to the strike temperature of 154 degrees. I get that water recirculating during that ramp up, and once it hits 90 degrees, I add my brewing salts. And like I do with the 6.5 Gallon Anvil Foundry, I am using 120 volts. So it does take a little more time to heat up, but not near as much as I thought. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, let's get into the recipe, starting with the grain bill for this beer. Start with the base malts, and I have 7 pounds, 4 ounces of Maris Otter. And to that, I add 2 pounds of two-row pale malt, and then I round out that base malt with 1 more pound of Munich malt. Then, to get that color and flavor that you expect from an amber ale, I start adding a little bit of specialty malts. I start with 12 ounces of Crystal 40L, then 8 ounces of Crystal 120L, and I finish that off with 8 ounces of Victory malt. I get all of those malts into the mill, and I mill them together and get them ready for mashing. Once the strike temperature is reached, I mash in and give it a good stir, and then I drop the power on the heating elements to 80%, and I recirculate this mash for an entire hour. With that time to wait, I get the boil additions ready. For the boil additions, I have 0.60 ounces of Horizon hops that I'll add at 60 minutes. At 10 minutes, I have a mix of a half ounce of Cascade and a half ounce of Centennial. And at flame out, I have that same mix of a half ounce of Cascade and half ounce of Centennial. And of course, I have my usual boil additions of yeast nutrients at 10 minutes and a little bit of Whirlfloc at 2 minutes. So as we know now, this is a 5-gallon batch brewed on the 10.5 Gallon Anvil Foundry. This entire mash process is 60 minutes, 50 minutes of that being at 154 degrees, and that last 10 minutes being 10 minutes of a mash out at 168 degrees. After the mash out, I lift the malt pipe out of the foundry, and it takes me a bit of work to get used to these hooks. I am pretty good at lifting the 6.5 gallon foundry basket out and placing it on that ring. Hooks are a little different method, and it's going to take some time to get used to that. As it drains, I sparge with a gallon of 170 degree Fahrenheit water, and then I set the foundry into boil mode. After that last hop addition, I start to chill the wort and I get it down to my target pitching temperature of 65 degrees. At this point, I transfer my wort into a 6.5 gallon for Monster Carboy. Then I pitch my yeast starter of Y Yeast 1056, the American Ale yeast strain, I believe is its full name. Wait about 2 weeks, keg it, carbonate it with the Blickman Quick Carb, pull off a couple bottles to save for moments like this, but then take the rest to the festival, enjoy it, talk about it, drank my fair share of it, not gonna lie, brought back what was left home, but now it's time to taste it on this video. It is tasting time for the Amber Ale, and first thing I want to say is that this is as cold as ice. Well, I guess not quite because it wasn't frozen, but it's really cold, and trying to get a shot of the clarity of this beer has been tough because the condensation comes back instantly. This has been in the fridge and kept getting bumped farther and farther and farther back and surrounded by more glass and aluminum. So I will say, I'll base the appearance after what I saw at the festival. It's clear. It's if you were to look at it and judge it, you would say it's just clear. I mean, just barely clear. It's not enough to be hazy or cloudy, but just clear. It's not crystal clear. I didn't do any findings on it, did I? No, I didn't do any gelatin no, I didn't. Now I remember exactly the situation I had. Some silifine that I needed for something that was much more in need of finding than this beer was, and I only had enough for one, so this didn't have any findings. So with a little finding or even just a little time, it probably would have really cleared out tremendously. But the color, it's, as you can see, it's red. It's on that more coppery amber side. An Irish red, I think, would be darker than this, but it's not an Irish red. It's an American amber ale. I think it's, if I were to judge it on an SRM card, it might barely be in the right range. But this wasn't for competition. This is for people to enjoy and drink, which, again, we did, and other people did, not just me and my group, I don't think. No, I'm just kidding there. So let's get into the other characteristics, the part that makes drinking beer part of drinking beer, starting with the aroma. Naturally, as you'd imagine with a beer like this, its first thing is the malts. To get a little bit of that caramel. It's like a rich caramel, not a burnt caramel, kind of like a thick caramel syrup type thing. Not quite a maple syrup, like a pancake syrup, the sugary non-maple syrup products, but more like an ice cream caramel, a caramel you put on an ice cream. Little bit of somewhere in a raisin prune group, maybe more a plum before it's actually dried into a prune. A little fresher. Actually, it's probably closer, more of a kind of a plum aroma to it. And with that is a little bit of hops. You get a little bit of that earthiness, a little bit of just a citrus tinge on the nose there too, from the probably from the Centennial more than the Cascade. But let's get into the actual flavor of this beer. All of that follows through, everything I just described. Hits you first with the malt right on the tongue, a little bit of that fruitiness from the kind of those dried fruits. It's actually probably more of a raisin / prune than plum on the flavor. It's got a little bit more of a distinctness to it than the freshness on the taste, like that kind of that, what's the word? I can't think of it. Like that, not intense, like condensed flavor, condensed when you dry a fruit. Then the bitterness right down the finish, which is nice. And there's that bit of distinct hop in there too, but not too much of either. It's not too sweet. It's not too bitter. Mouthfeel, it's medium, not too heavy, definitely not light. Great sensation all around. Just enough alcohol to wake everything up. The carbonation here, even though the head did not hold, which was also a problem at the, at the festival, though you didn't really notice in a 2 or 3 pour ounce, but I noticed being the one pouring the beer. Head would come up on pour, but dissipate really quick. But the carbonation is holding there really well, which is working well with while the alcohol wakes up kind of everything in there, the carbonation pulls the rest of those flavors in. Just a really nice sensation, a really nice flavor. Yeah, it's a kind of a rinse and repeat. I'm getting the same thing again, but even with my palate adjusting, nothing's really kind of waning out of there. It's like just got just enough bitterness, just enough sweetness to it. Really good beer. I really like red ales of all kinds, even when they're leaning towards one side or the other, like an Irish or I guess maybe an Irish or a Scottish can be in this realm and more malt forward than this would have with the hops. Then you can do a red IPA, which obviously is going to be more hoppy, but I still just like that kind of the combination of a really rich, bready base malt and then throw some fairly strong but not aggressive specialty malts. Like if I wanted to be more aggressive, I could use some Special B or maybe some, I'm not sure what Special B is, just probably the most aggressive special malt I can think of off the top of my head. But some other ones as well. Of course, I make a statement like that, and then every specialty malt now, I can't think of one. It just completely escapes. Special Roast. There's another one that's a little more malt forward than the 40. The 120. That's obviously a rich malt, but I don't believe I already forgot the recipe. I don't think I used near as much of that as I did the 40. No, I did not. No, I used about 2/3 of the same. So I really enjoy making this beer year after year for this festival. I will make it the next year as well. I'm positive, because it's always a good conversation starter. It's a good beer to have. It's a good beer to have on hand when you're waiting for people to come up to the stand. And I didn't talk about its name. It probably opened the show once I edited it. It's called Annie Amber. I named it after my dog Annie, who's made several appearances here and there in the video. She's not. I don't know where she is. I was gonna say she's crashed out on the couch in the room. I was gonna say quarantine. I'm not sick. What's the word I used before? Take whatever word I used before, and that's what I'm doing out here. Exiled too? That's probably more accurate. Anyway, what was my point? Oh, that's the other thing about this festival. It's for dogs. We love to name our beers after our dogs, past and present, and we end up making something out of the ordinary. A seltzer, it's been the past 2 years, and we named it after the cats, because cats would bring seltzer to a beer festival. That's, at least ours would, because they're idiots. And that's what we call it. Oh, I did a video on this. I'm repeating myself. That's how long it's been since I've done one of these. Anyway, got some more videos coming. Back to some 2.5 gallon batches on the 6.5 gallon Foundry, but look for that 10.5 to pop up again. We got some more events coming. I have a big beer I'm collabing with another group in my another member of my brew club for our big award ceremony. So I got to make a lot of beer of that, and I got to pull out the 10.5 for that. So even though I have that, it's going to be mostly in that 2.5 gallon or that 6.5 gallon Foundry focus realm, with some special appearances from the 10.5. So for all the other 6.5 gallon Foundry owners that are looking for content, there'll still be a lot here. In fact, there's one coming next. I'm going to record right after this. So I know for a fact there's at least one more coming, but I know there's more than that because I have footage for all the others. Know something talking about it. Let me get to recording that and put those out later. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.